I'm 102 years old. I don't say that to impress anybody. At this age, you don't really impress people. You just remain. You wake up, you sit down, you look out a window, and you think about the things that followed you all the way here. And I'll tell you something that might surprise you. It isn't the big speeches I gave. It isn't the arguments I won. It isn't even the hard work, though, Lord knows, I did plenty of that. What stayed with me, what still visits me at night, is her silence. Because silence isn't always nothing. Sometimes silence is a message so loud it shakes the walls. And I didn't learn how to hear it until there was nobody left to speak. I live in a care home now. That's what they call it, care. The staff is kind, mostly. They try. They call me Hun, like I'm their uncle. My room is small, clean, plain. I've got one window that faces a parking lot. I watch families come and go. I watch a daughter help her father out of a car. I watch a grandson carrying flowers that look too bright for a place like this. I watch delivery trucks back up and beep and leave. And at night, when the building gets quiet, my head gets loud. So I'm telling this story because I'm tired of swallowing it. And because maybe, just maybe, someone watching this has a quiet house too, or a quiet marriage, or a quiet relationship with a grown child. And you've been telling yourself, oh, it's fine, we're just tired. That's what I told myself. Her name was Ruth, not Ruthie. She didn't like that, just Ruth. She was the kind of woman who didn't waste words. When Ruth spoke, it meant something. And when she didn't speak, that meant something too. I just didn't respect that part, not until it was too late. I met Ruth in 1946. I was 22, home from the service, trying to act like I had a plan. I didn't. I had a job at a printing shop, ink under my nails, paper cuts on my fingers, the smell of hot machines and fresh paper. Ruth worked at a bakery. She'd step out with flour on her sleeves and her hair pinned up neat. And she smelled like yeast and sugar, like warm bread on a cold day. I swear, she carried comfort around like a coat. I asked her out, and she said, "Why?" Not rude, just direct. That was Ruth. I said, "Because I like you." She looked at me for a long second, like she was weighing the truth of me. Then she nodded once and said, "All right, but I work early." That was our romance. No fancy lines, no games. We'd walk, we'd talk. We'd sit in the car and listen to the radio. One time I bought popcorn at the movies, and she ate all of it and didn't apologize. And I loved her for that. She didn't perform. She didn't pretend. We married in 1949. Small wedding. Her mother cried. My father shook my hand like I'd signed a contract. And honestly, that's kind of what I thought marriage was back then. A contract. Two people doing their jobs. I didn't understand marriage is also a living thing, and living things need attention. Not eventually, not when life calms down. They need it while the days are still here. At first, Ruth talked a lot. Not empty talk, real talk. She'd tell me about the bakery, the people, the troubles, the joys. She'd tell me what she wanted our life to feel like. She said, "I don't want a quiet house. I want a home where you can hear laughter." I told her, "It won't be quiet." We had 2 kids, a girl, then a boy. Ruth stopped working when our daughter was born because childcare cost too much, and Ruth didn't trust strangers anyway. We bought a little house with a porch that sagged on one side. I promised I'd fix it, and I did, eventually. I always did things eventually. And that word, eventually, it's a dangerous word. It lets you delay love. It lets you postpone listening. It lets you think you'll get another chance. Then I started working more hours. That's how it begins for a lot of men. Work feels clean. Work makes sense. You put in hours and you get paid. The boss notices. People call you reliable. You feel useful. Home is messy. Home has dishes and noise and kids who need you when you're tired. Home has a wife who wants to tell you about her day, and your brain is still stuck at the shop, counting paper and ink and deadlines. So I leaned into work. And listen, this is important. I did love Ruth. I truly did. But I loved her in the way I understood love. I paid the bills. I kept the heat on. I fixed what broke. I thought providing was the whole job. Ruth needed more than a provider. She needed a partner. Some nights she'd ask me to come to bed. I'd say, in a minute. She'd ask me to sit on the porch with her when the kids were asleep. I'd say, I've got to finish this. She wanted me. I wanted quiet. And when she talked, I'd make those little sounds men make to pretend we're listening. Yeah. Uh-huh. Ruth would stop mid-sentence and look at me. Are you even here? She'd ask. And I'd get defensive, because being called out feels like being accused. I'm right here, aren't I? I'd say. And Ruth would hold that look, just 1 second too long, then turn back to the sink. That look was the beginning. Not yelling, not drama, just the first crack. Her silence didn't show up overnight. It crept in like winter. First, she stopped telling me the small things. Then she stopped asking my opinion about the kids. Then she stopped waiting up for me. I'd come home late and the kitchen would be clean, lights off, her side of the bed already cold. Not frozen, just not warmed by her. I told myself, she's tired. And she was, but tired people can still reach. Ruth stopped reaching. And here's the shameful part. I didn't notice quickly because, in a selfish way, it made my life easier. No questions, no disappointment on her face, no talks I had to stay awake for. Just a quiet house. The quiet house she told me she never wanted. I remember one night clearly. I was about 40. Ruth was washing dishes at the sink. The window was cracked open. I could hear a dog barking far away. The radio was low in the other room. The kids were finally in bed. And Ruth said, without turning around, I think I'm getting lonely. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I didn't know what to do with that sentence. I didn't know how to hold it. I said, you've got the kids, you've got your sister, you've got church. Ruth dried her hands slowly and turned to me. Her face was calm in a way that should have scared me. I meant lonely with you, she said. That should have stopped my heart. That should have made me sit down like a man who understood what he was about to lose. Instead, I got defensive. What do you want from me? I snapped. I'm working my tail off. Ruth nodded once. I know, she said. 2 words. No fight, no tears, no shouting. Just, I know. And after that night, she got quieter. Back then, I told myself she was being stubborn, that she was punishing me with silence. Now I know it wasn't punishment. It was resignation. She had tried words. The words didn't land, so she stopped spending them. Years rolled on. The kids grew up. The mortgage got paid. I got promotions. We bought a better car. We took a family trip to a lake once. There's a photo from that trip. Ruth is smiling, but her eyes look far away. I didn't see it then. I see it now. When the kids left home, I thought, now it'll be just us. Now we'll reconnect. But just us felt awkward, like we were two people who used to know each other and now didn't have the map. I tried then. I really did. I'd walk into the kitchen and ask, "What are you making?" Like that could rebuild years. Ruth would say, "Chicken," and that would be it. One time I said, "You don't talk to me anymore." Ruth looked at me and said, "I used to." That's all. I used to. No anger, just fact. And I said something foolish. I said, "Well, you could start again." Ruth stared at me, and I watched something close behind her eyes. Not rage, finality. She turned back to the stove and stirred the pot like the conversation was finished, because for her, it was. And instead of learning how to be present, I stayed busy. I worked later than I needed to. I made jokes with other men. Keeps me out of trouble. Ruth never laughed. She would just nod. That nod was its own kind of silence. Then Ruth got sick. Not one dramatic moment. Small changes. She'd forget words, lose her keys in strange places, tell the same story twice and not know she'd already told it. At first I teased her lightly because I was scared, and teasing is what people do when they're afraid of the truth. Ruth didn't smile. "Don't," she said. So I stopped. The doctor used careful language, cognitive changes, early stages, progressive. Ruth sat still in that office, no crying, no questions, just quiet acceptance, like she'd already seen the road ahead. On the drive home, I started talking too much, filling the air, trying to push fear out with noise. "We'll manage," I said. "We'll take it day by day." Ruth stared out the window and said, "Don't make it noisy." I asked, "What do you mean?" She didn't look at me. "I've had enough noise," she said. And I understood. She wasn't only talking about illness. She was talking about all the years I talked around our life, instead of sitting inside it with her. After that, her silence changed shape. Before, her silence was chosen. Now her silence was being taken from her, piece by piece. And that's when I finally understood what I'd lost. Because even when Ruth was quiet in our marriage, she still had her mind. She still had herself. And I didn't meet her there. When it got unsafe at home, Ruth had to go into a nursing facility. She wandered once. The police brought her back. She didn't recognize me. She stood on our porch shaking, and I realized love isn't always enough to protect someone from a broken brain. The day we moved her in, Ruth didn't speak at all. The nurse asked her name. Ruth stared. The nurse asked if she wanted tea. Ruth stayed quiet. I sat by her bed and talked because I didn't know what else to do. "It's just for a while," I said. Nothing. "I'll come every day," I said. Nothing. Visiting hours ended. I stood at the door and felt like my legs belonged to somebody else. I turned and said, "I love you." Ruth stared at her hands. Then she lifted her eyes and looked at me. That look wasn't soft. It wasn't cruel either. It was plain and sharp, like truth. And it said, "Where was that when I could use it?" Then her eyes drifted away again. I went home to the quiet house she never wanted. I ate standing at the counter because sitting alone felt wrong. I slept on my side of the bed and woke up too often because the other half was too still. I visited Ruth for 2 years. Some days she said a word. Once she said, bread, and I didn't know if she was hungry or remembering the bakery. I started learning the language I ignored. When someone stops talking, you start watching. Their face, their hands, their breathing. You start paying attention to what you should have listened to long ago. One day I said, Ruth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. She didn't speak, but she reached out and touched my wrist with 2 fingers, light as a feather. Then she pulled her hand back. That was the last intentional touch she ever gave me. Ruth died on a Wednesday morning. I was there. Sunlight came through the blinds in thin stripes. Her breathing slowed, then stopped. No last speech, no neat ending, just silence. And in that silence, I finally heard everything she'd been trying to tell me for years. I can't go back. I can't return to that night at the sink when she said she was lonely and answer the way I should have. I can't give her the years when she still had her full mind and needed a husband who would sit down and be present. I'm left with guesses, and guesses aren't the same as a conversation. So if you're watching this and your life has gotten quiet, your marriage, your family, your friendships, please don't assume quiet means fine. Sometimes quiet means I tried. Sometimes it means I'm waiting for you to notice. Sometimes it means I'm giving up without leaving. And that is a heartbreak you don't hear until it's too late. Don't make a big speech. Don't make it noisy. Just sit down next to them and ask, simple and honest, are you okay? And then be quiet long enough to hear the answer. Because one day, if you're lucky enough to live as long as I have, the quiet gets very big, and you'll wish you listened when the silence was still asking.